So the vegetation on your land, you should be taking that into account. Do you have, if you have 40 acres, is 20 of it in timber? Is your ground tilled? Is it a pasture? Is it a weed pasture, which some of us have been up against before? So those are the kinds of things you need to look at in terms of what do you have to work with. So back to the soils. What do you get out of a soil test? Well, organic matter is pretty important. Your organic matter can vary, say, between 2 and 8. I've seen some that are lower than 2%, but and some that are higher than 8%, but they're about in that range. I'd say if you've got an organic matter of 3 to 6, that's really optimal. Organic matter is we'll get into this more, but it is the living part of the soil complex and the living and decaying part, and it helps retain moisture. It buffers the nutrients in the soil, and it has a whole lot of properties that lead to a healthy soil and healthy plants. So that's why we try to keep that in check, so we know what we've got. And so the reason I said do a baseline is because if you start amending your soil, adding compost, manure, straw, whatever, so you're adding stuff to it continually, you want to check after a few years on where you are. And so it's good to have a baseline from where you started, and then you can see how your management practices affect the soil. And that's a good thing to know, is from what you're doing, how is that changing the soil. The pH also is the acidity or alkalinity of the soil. Most plants grow in the 6 to 7 pH is probably optimal. If you get lower than, say, 5.5, you need to, it's getting too acidic for a lot of crops. And if you get over 7, it's getting too alkaline. And I know a lot of southern Idaho has very alkaline soils, and some of you may be in that area. So those are the things that you need to know. If you're in an alkaline soil area, you just need to be aware of that and how you're going to work with that. Didn't really go into taking a soil sample, but we do have a U of I publication. It's quite old, but it's still, you can tell by the graphics, but it's still you know, a really good publication on how to take one. And just briefly, I'll tell you that when taking a soil sample, you don't just want to get it from one place. You want to take a composite sample and go around an area that you're going to, say you have an area that is going to be a pasture. You would want to go around and take 10 to 12, maybe up to 15 different core samples around that area, put them in a bucket, mix them up, and give a composite sample to the analytical lab. Because then you take away, you know, any strange things that might be at one site. It could be a spot that's particularly acidic or who knows what, and that way you decrease the variability. So where do you take your soil test to get it analyzed? The universities, both Washington State University and University of Idaho, do samples. In northern Idaho, we do take ours to our county extension educator, and they will give you the information you need, and it usually goes to Moscow, where it's handy for those of us here in Latah County because it's right here. But in southern Idaho, a lot of people send off to Western laboratories or in other private soil and water analytical labs. And in Washington, Northwest Ag Consultants is just one. I just wanted to give you at least one option there, but there are many options to choose from. The other thing about soils that you'd want to know is your soil texture and your soil capabilities, and that's what NRCS, that's Natural Resource Conservation Service, has been working on soil surveys over the years. In fact, every county office probably has your county soil survey in a publication that you could borrow and look at if you prefer hard copies, and many people do. They have now turned all that information into an online program that you can go into. You press the green button there into the Web Soil Survey, and it'll take you through kind of a, you find your location, then you go through a series of things to find out where, like you'll get your map, and it'll show all the different variation of soil classes in your area, and then you can also go and find out what, like how many bushels of wheat grows in that area. You can't always find things that might deal with your specific crop, but you can get an idea of the productivity of the soil there. And if that land is good for building on, there's all kinds of things in there, even beyond agricultural uses for that. Yeah, go play with that and see what you can find out about your soil. So water resource considerations are also important for all aspects of agriculture, and you may or may not have any surface water on your property, but you should know what wells you have there and what's the water capacity pumping of your well, and also in some areas water rights are important, and they're also in southern Idaho. There are certain places that get water at certain times, and limitations in other parts of the season or times of the week. So you need to know all of those issues before you even set out. If you've already started an enterprise, you've probably already checked on some of those and know that about your region or your property. But for those of you just getting started, that's something to consider. Climate considerations are very important, particularly for crops, vegetables, fruits, and there's a lot of different aspects of climate that we need to be looking at. Of course, the growing season, the first and last frost that dates that we get in our location. There is existing county data for most of our areas. I found a site that is not actually an extension site. It's called davesgarden.com, and I found it a whole lot easier to use than going to the site I listed at the bottom of the slide, the climate data. There's all kinds of climate data on that national site, but I just didn't find it easy to use to figure out, where to get the information. But Dave's Garden, you go there and you put in your zip code, and you get, frost-free dates from spring to fall, and how many growing days you have, and I thought it was pretty interesting, so check that out. You need to look at the minimum winter temperatures, and this is related to your hardiness zones. I believe most of you know that the hardiness zone maps changed in 2012, and so what I have here are Washington and Idaho's 2012 hardiness zone maps. Now, hardiness zones are important particularly for perennial plants. And you know, if you go into the nursery to buy nursery plants, they'll usually have on there good for, you know, down to zone 3 or down to zone 5, and those are good things. You got to take all of the climate data into consideration, but hardiness zones are good to know. They will vary in your county. You know, if it says you're a 6, you know, don't assume you're a 6. It's likely over a county area, but there'll be some variation. And remember, it's just an average. Growing degree days. I wanted to bring this up. It is used a lot with fruit production. And a growing degree day is accumulation of heat units over time, and it's usually based on above 50 degrees, because above 50 degrees Fahrenheit is when, you know, plants could respond and starting to grow. And so I just wanted to share with you, if I can find this here on my desk. I went online to just get some quick growing degree days. There's a growing degree day calculator on the Weather Channel. And for instance, I put in Moscow's zip code, and I got an average is 1730, so 1,730 growing degree days. In this last year, 2013, we got 2009 growing degree days. And just a quick comparison, I put in Pocatello. Pocatello's average is 1,973, so they have more than our average. And then shift over to Wenatchee, Washington, and their average is 3,016. Okay, so just giving you an idea, and you know, so where there's fruit growing regions and a lot of the crops will respond well if they're in that higher growing degree days. And for instance, something like grapes need at least 1,000 growing degree days. There are a lot of other factors, so just because you have 1,000 growing degree days doesn't mean you're going to be a good location for wine grapes, but that's just to give you an idea of where you might be on that. But you'll have to investigate that a little bit more if you decide to go into fruit.